We are back on the platform and speaking with Dionisio today, and we are talking about fiscal matters in this segment of our program, Mr. Diagila. And the international agencies, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, they all are in favor of the government of the Bahamas putting in place that, because they believe that this is the way to go. In fact, there's a suggestion that if that is not put in place by July, that the Bahamas would be further downgraded or downgraded again. Should we be concerned about these international agencies?
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. The government has to do something, okay? And I think you're wrong in saying that they say you've got to introduce VAT. They say you've got to raise revenue. Now, their suggestion might be, we think that the best way to raise revenue is to introduce VAT, but at the end of the day, you've got to raise revenue or cut expenditure, okay? So what the business community is saying is, come to the people with a package. Come to us, the people that put you in office, with a package on what you're going to do to raise revenue, how it's not going to destroy the economy, and most importantly, how are you going to control your out-of-control spending?
Oh, the government has shown how they're doing that. I mean, in the first quarter, they have reduced the deficit by $66 million.
You're 500 million, buddy.
Yes.
500
million. In the first quarter.
My question is, I had to ask one of them, how did we get there? How did we get to this $500 million deficit?
What do you mean, how?
I mean, I remember the days when it wasn't so long ago, 2-3 years ago, when it was 100 million and all of a sudden we're at 500 million. And I was speaking to one of my friends in the Ministry of Finance. He said, well, remember we sold BTC and we got 260 million of that, and I kind of hit it a little. So the government needs to address this expenditure. It needs to address its inability to collect taxes properly.
But
And there are other, VAT is a major surgery. We're saying before you put the patient on the table and rip his heart out, man, see if you could put him on some pills and try to get him better.
No, but you say how we got there. Yeah. But you should know how we got there. You drive on smoother roads.
I understand that. Look, Brother Jones.
You have a brand new section of the hospital.
You got a hospital,
you
got
an
airport, you got a stadium, you got new roads, you got all kind of buildings in the Family Islands. Okay, so
that's how you got there.
I agree. We spent all this money, right?
And the government said they needed to do these things.
And we need to pay for it. I agree with that.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is the value-added tax the way to go? We feel in the business community that you are going to cause such a traumatic effect on the economy, that you're going to throw an economy that's bubbling along right now, very fragile, back into a massive recession for at least 2-3 years. Now, is that what you want? And you're going to be taxing economic activity, right? You're taxing economic activity. If the economic activity starts to diminish, you are taxing a declining base. So you ain't going to get what you think you could get by introducing value-added tax. If everybody said, well, anyway, that's it, I can't run this business anymore, shut my business down, lay my people off, what you could tax? Ain't nothing there to tax.
Yeah.
So the fact is, you have to do it in such a way that you do not cause the economy of the Bahamas to go into cardiac arrest.
Let me make this clear now. I'm not necessarily for that.
I know.
Okay, so
you got a job to do.
I need to make that clear. But I'm just putting questions to you, and I'm putting questions to you so that we can elicit the kind of answers that I believe the public would need to be better educated. There's a view, Mr. Diagila, that Bahamians are tax averse. But you just don't, like other people, they don't like paying taxes. They try to duck taxes as much as possible. And it's not only Bahamians, but people all over the world. The government should not be asking you, the businessman or the business community, whether or not I should tax you. The government should do what is in the national interest. Isn't that right?
Yes, in the national interest You must foster, coddle, cajole your economy into motion. And our economy is, you know, petering along as far as most Bahamians are concerned. Now you've got, you know, you've got your bright, you've got Albany, which is foreign direct investment. You've got Bahama, which is major foreign direct investment. You've got some stuff going on in the Family Islands that you mentioned. But you've got to make sure, you've got to, you know, just get your economy, you have to tax it in such a way you don't throw it into recession. And that's the skill. That's the art. That's what they have to do. And there's a firm belief by many, many Bahamians that if you introduce value-added tax, you're going to throw your economy into a full-blown recession again. Now, you may be wrong, but it's important for us to have this discussion. I have to believe that since the business community has sort of risen up and said, hold it now, what's all this VAT? What are we supposed to do, just lie down and play dead and just accept what you feed us? No, we're going to push back. We're going to push back if for any other reason than to test what you're saying. Are you telling us the right thing? Give us some examples. Why do you think the way you think? And there are many people out there who believe that the value-added tax doesn't have to be introduced. You can have a payroll tax, simpler, easier, more straightforward. You know, you can increase fees here, you can increase fees there. I mean, you read in the papers every day of this association and that association saying this is under tax. What about this? This is uncollected. What about this?
Yeah, but Mr. Dionisio, even though you have white hair, right?
Yes.
You are young enough to remember when the business community pushed back on national insurance.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not that. No, that was 1974. I was only 10 years old. So. But I remember my father talking about it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. That this is like this is like income tax, and we shouldn't have it, and it's going to damage the economy. And you hear all of that stuff. In 1974, you said it was?
National insurance, yeah.
Yes. That's right. I was a ZNS reporter at the introduction of national insurance, going around the Bahamas with Sir Clifford Darling and Mr. Earl Thompson then at the time, introducing this thing and reporting on it. And there was resistance to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Is this pretty much the same motion?
No, not really. Human nature is that you're going to resist any attempt to take more of your income and give it to the government. That's human nature, right? But I reiterate, the business community is not against the raising of additional revenues. We're not naive enough to think that if the government does not arrest its $500 million deficit, in 5-6 years, we'll be in a far worse state than we are now. I admire the government. I commend the government for having the discussion. So to say, everybody, wake up. We are at a $500 million deficit, and if we don't deal with this, we will be recession. That's a mild word to what's coming. It could be a depression, devaluation, all these the D words that we don't want to have. So I admire the government for having the discussion. Our only point is that is VAT the right thing to introduce? There are ways to raise revenue without throwing your economy into a tailspin.
Good, okay. And you say that is likely to throw the economy into a tailspin. Mind you, some people would say that you are a purveyor of doom.
No, I'm
and
not.
gloom.
No. Because if I said don't raise no taxes,
yeah,
I know you got to raise taxes.
Yeah.
So I know it's going to have some effect on the economy. It's what do you do to have the least damaging effect on your economy?
Good. What would you suggest?
I would suggest a payroll tax. It's easier to collect. It's easier to understand. I would say, okay, what is the definition of payroll? Payroll is any income that you receive. I would remove the cap that national insurance has. You pay 5%, 5% for employers and 5% for employees. It's not a major amount. If I'm making well, maybe you exempt the first $100 of salary, $200, $150 of salary, so you don't affect those less fortunate than us. And you know, right now they tax you at up to $650 a week. You just remove that cap and you say, okay, everybody pay 5%.
Well, why should the employer pay a payroll tax? The employer is matching NIB contributions now. Why should, if you are going to introduce a payroll tax, why should the employer match it?
Employer we as business people realize that the government needs to raise revenue, right?
Yeah.
So 5%
But there are a whole lot of businesses are hard pressed already.
You don't think VAT can kill them? If they hard press now,
No, but
the 5%, the 5%,
is
the
supposed to be
5%,
passed on.
the 5%, yes, but Brother Jones, if you pass it on to your consumer and your consumer doesn't accept your pass on, what you could do? You either have to absorb it or you have to go out of business. So I'm trying to come up with a tax. I'm not, as I said, I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to feel some pain. It's what pain can we take without damaging, completely devastating the economy. And national insurance is a tax that is relatively easy to collect. The infrastructure is in place. It's easy to understand. You know, and the only thing you have to define is what is payroll. Because there are some people out there, I know there's a lawyer friend of mine who said, well, I don't draw a payroll. I get a profit at the end of the day, so I don't pay national insurance, let alone payroll tax. So, you know, you have to tighten up a few holes there. And then there are some people in our economy who don't make any payroll, but are quite affluent. Yeah. So you have to define it and tweak a way to make it as fair as possible. But it's fairly progressive. It's fairly easy to collect. It's fairly easy to understand. You know, if I'm making $300 a week and I've got to give $15 of that in tax, well, I get the first 100 exempt, so I maybe got $10 in tax. You know, when I get 300 and I get $290, that ain't gonna kill me. I can still live. You know, so it is. Businesses probably need to pay more because we always need to pay more because the government always looking at us to pay more, so we got to pay more. Yeah, I get that, but I don't think it's going to destroy the purchasing power of the consumer, and that is what I'm most concerned about.
Okay, I spoke to a good friend of mine the other day, and he said to me that there should be taxes or a tax levied on dividends. That there are a whole lot of wealthy people and wealthy businesses in this country with shares in various things, and the government should levy a tax on the dividends that they get on their shares. Do you support that?
Well, first let me step back. I'm a chairman of a publicly traded company. I'm on the board of another publicly traded company which pay dividends. Now, you're right. There are probably a lot of wealthy people that draw dividends in this country, and I'm sure if you ask them, would you mind terribly paying a 5% of your in tax if you didn't introduce a VAT or cause all this turmoil and upheaval? I'm sure that most people would agree. Okay, it ain't gonna kill me. We're looking for taxes that are not gonna kill us. So I would even say, you know, include that as part of payroll. But some companies could say, look, I already paid it as an employer, so the shareholders of that company have already paid their share when you have the 5% as an employer and 5% as an employee. It's already been paid. The shareholders already paid their fair share. So that might be an argument against it. One might say, why not pay a tax on interest? You got your money sitting in the bank. You ain't getting much anyway, but if you got money to sit up in the bank, why don't you pay 5% of that? I mean, dividends, interest, whatever. I mean, as the government determines what revenue it needs to raise, but you got to be mindful of you don't want to destroy your economy. Okay?
Yeah, but you know what the government is saying, that here we are, we have stimulated the economy of the Bahamas so that superwash can expand. Stimulated the economy by attracting investors like Bahama. And so we have stimulated the economy. Okay. It's about time you pay something back to the government. And so this is the way we are doing it. And they say too, the argument is that, listen, you go to Florida and you pay a sales tax, and you don't kick a fit about that. You go to the checkout and they say, well, the sales tax is 5%. You have no difficulty whatsoever. You pay it, and you walk out of Neiman Marcus or walk out of Walmart or J.C. Penney without a problem. But you have a problem paying it here. That is what they say.
Yeah, but that's 5%. You proposing 15%.
Well,
as I said, Brother Jones,
well,
do not make it so onerous that it destroys the goose that's laying the golden egg.
So you would be happy with 5 or 7%?
Yeah, I don't think anybody would object to that.
5 or 7%?
Yes, I don't think anybody would object to such an enormous percentage. The biggest concern is that, you know, these things start to creep. So you start at 5, then you go to 6, then you go to 7, then you get 8, and 5 years from now we're at 15. But the fact of the matter is, you have to not shock your economy into a recession.
Okay.
Okay?
So, but the introduction of a 7% VAT will not shock the economy. That is what you're saying.
Brother Jones.
Yes.
Okay, value-added tax. There are other facets to value-added tax that make it unattractive. Okay, so 7%, I could live with that, 5, 6, 7%. But it's complicated. It's paperwork. It's like you've got to collect it from this one, then you've got to say, oh, how much did I pay?
Well,
then I got to
no,
no. That ain't complicated.
No,
That ain't complicated. You add up what you pay, you multiply it by what, 8 or 9.8%, you send it in. That ain't complicated.
But if you are a registrant of VAT, you would have in your computer system whatever you collected from the public for VAT. As a matter of fact, you would be obliged to give the customer a receipt.
Right, Jones.
And there can be an easy audit of what you do.
Yeah, but it ain't just what you collect from the consumer. It's what you pay on your suppliers.
Yes.
So you got to say, okay, I got to keep track of what I paid my plumber and my electrician. So I paid him VAT. So I got to keep track of that. Then I got to see what I took in from my consumer. So I got to keep track of that. And at the end of the month, I see where I stand and I send the difference to the government. And I got to keep all those records because the tax man might come. So I got to keep everything organized, right? So I've got to, it's a calculation that goes on. And in many, many, many countries where you have paid out more tax than you've collected, the government owes you a refund. And they can't cut the check. So, to me...
They can give you a credit.
Yeah.
They can give you a tax credit.
To me, it's a little bit more complicated. It's a lot of record keeping. It means that businesses have to ramp up their administrative costs to account for this. They've got to change their computer systems. It's just complicated. It's not straightforward. And there have to be even if you, let's say you came up with a 10% dividend tax, right? Dividends paid, multiplied with 10%, pretty straightforward, right? You ain't got to, what did I pay him and net that off against this and back and forth and all this confusion and accountants and, man, the accountants, boy, the time coming, boy, hope that come because this is going to be gravy for them. Who's going to be able to keep track of all? Anyway, you must have a computer system I don't know about, but you have to keep track of all this stuff. Every time you pay this one and that one and this one, and then what's going to happen is you're not going to want to do business with people who are not VAT registered. And then another thing that it does is that the people who are under 100,000, they have an unfair advantage. They don't have to deal with that. And who checks that they're under 100? We got an army of people running around the country saying, what revenue we have? Check it. Man, I deal in cash. You check it if you want to check it. It's just complicated. There's just so much checking and auditing and, it's not as easy and straightforward as you think it's going to be. Administratively, it's going to be difficult to administer, and administratively, it's going to be very difficult to audit.
Yeah, but Mr. Dionisio, it is administered properly and well in Barbados, has been for many years from the early 70s.
When you speak to the people from Barbados, they say when that was introduced, they had an army of auditors that flooded the country to make sure, go stand in businesses, watch people transact to see if it was recorded and all the rest of it. You want to see things like happen here? I mean, come on. That's the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, We're not a tax, we're not a, we have never been burdened with this type of administrative tax. This is something new for us. We weren't born with all the people in England and Holland and Belgium and all those countries. They're born with that. That's in their DNA. This is something new for us. And to try to move, if you imagine that everybody's against this, try to move a population that is against something like this to comply, it's going to cost you a fortune. We have bought into national insurance. And even in that particular instance, we're probably at, what, 70, 80% compliance. But, this is the difficulty. Collecting taxes is difficult.
Okay.
So don't make it too hard to administer.
All right, we take this break on the program. We'll come right back.